Hi everyone, welcome to PPM SaaS webinar. I'm Chitra Mehendale, a Senior Technical Account Manager in SaaS. In today's webinar, Self-Service Portlet, I'm going to present an overview about this powerful and user-centric feature to demonstrate how any business user can utilize this feature to present the business data in the graphical format of his or her choice. So let's get started. So here is the agenda. So I'll start with why self-service portlet, why product has introduced the self-service portlet, followed by a features overview, and then how to use it, and then how you can share the data shown in self-service portlet using OData link in the Excel or Power BI UI. And at the end, we will have a Q&A session. So the main reason product has delivered self-service portlet is to simplify portlet creation and provide an ability to individual business user to present the data in the graphical format of his and her choice using easy drag and drop action. In earlier versions of PPM, business users felt a bit constrained in presenting the data in the format required on the fly, basically, unless those portlets are configured by admins or tech teams. But with this powerful feature now, the user can represent the data in basically many formats. And I will be talking about that in next few slides. So here are the high level features of self-service portlet. So all PPM business users can configure charts or graphs. So they don't need admins to do it for them. They can do it by themselves. And there is no special security requirement to have access to this portlet. It's available to all business users of PPM. The look and feel is pretty cool, and it's inspired by the Excel and Power BI tools that most of the users are familiar with. This is a built-in Java portlet which was introduced in 9.62, and a product has been adding a lot of enhancements in this feature to make it even more powerful and usable. Security checks are done at the self-service portlet data source level and not at the portlet level, and I'll talk about that in the next few slides so that it's more clear. Until 9.66, there were self-service portlet or the data sources which were mostly the inbuilt or out-of-the-box data sources which are available. But from 9.66 onwards, any SQL data source that you might have already defined in a system, or you plan to do that in the future, you can use that data source as a self-service data source. So let's look at the basically self-service portlet journey in brief. As I said, it was introduced in 9.62. In 9.63, there were 5 additional chart types were introduced that were line, area, stacked area, pie, and donut graphs. In 9.65, there was financial portlet which was designed with SSP, and then SSP was supported in the project overview page also in PPM dashboard page. In 9.66, the SSP was made available in Teams overview page and the request dashboard. It also has a main feature that you can utilize any SQL dashboard data source for any SSP portlet. And also you can share the data in the self-service portlet using the OData link. In version 10.0, there were some additional features, enhancement done to the self-service portlet by adding favorite views, drill to view, and also additional 2 display chart types, that is a Sankey diagram and Gauge diagram. And now you can actually migrate the SSP data source from one instance to other using K-migrator, and that's important feature especially for the upgrades. And in 10.0.1, there are some conditional formatting supported on grid view. Also, you can apply colors on the grid view to convert the grid view into the heat map. So that is the journey so far for the Self-Service Portlet and its features. So let's see how you can utilize it or how you can use this feature. So as I said, now you can use any existing SQL data source that is already defined for the dashboard. And normally these are defined in the workbench and utilized in standard portlets. So there are no restrictions on the column or filter that you have already defined in the SQL dashboard data source. Just make sure that the dashboard data source is enabled in the workbench. Okay, so how do you use it? So before using self-service portlet, you first need to define the self-service portlet data source. And to do that, you can log in. When you log into PPM, in the administration menu, go to the portlet definitions, and you will see this manage self-service portlet data sources. Once you select this menu item, you will see this UI. Hit the create button. It lists existing all the data sources, self-service data source portlets. But if you want to create your own, just add click this create button. Once you hit that create button, you will see this UI. The first tab information is shown here. The first one, make sure it's enabled here. The data source is enabled. Then the SQL data source. So when you click on this drop down list, it shows the all SQL data source defined in your system currently, and you can use any of them. So all the columns and filters that are coming from the SQL source will be part of this SSP data source. Provide the name that is unique for this SSP data source, and that will be seen when you actually configure the portlet, and that I'll show in the next slide. The service name, provide a unique name also. So this is used when you are using this SSP data source in the URL. And also mention the reference code. It's important. I mean, it's used during especially the migration process. Now let's talk about the next few tabs shown in this UI. The next tab is the access. So here is the security. Basically, you can configure the security for SSP data source using this tab, and you can give access to specific users or the security groups or the org units. So this is where I was talking about that the security for the SSP is actually controlled at the SSP data source level and not at the portlet level. Okay, so using this tab, you can configure that. And now let's look at the columns, and OData link. I will talk about that a little later in the presentation. So in the columns tab, what it does when you actually have selected, let's go back a bit. So I've selected a demo program list. This is the SQL data source that I already defined in my system. I've selected that, and now what it does is it shows all the columns that I've selected in that data source. It's now available for SSP data source. Okay, so it shows this column list like here, and then if you want to rename any of these columns to make it more user friendly, you can actually rename using this custom column label, and also in the hyperlink column you can map those columns. So it basically by default it shows all the full column list that is available for the SQL data source. Now if you want to restrict some of the fields and you don't want to give access to the entire column list coming from the SQL data source, there is one column right below this column list. It's column mode. By default it shows all, but if you want to hide some of them, you can use either these two preferences. Basically, when you say show all except it, you can. So if you want to out of suppose 20 columns, you want to show most of them except there are two columns like ID columns or maybe some sensitive information columns that you do not want to give access, then you can use those except clause to select only those few columns that you want to hide. In other case where you have all the information here, but you want to expose only couple of columns, for example in this case like a program name and program manager name, you can just select use the third preference and select only these two columns and hide everything else. So using this way, you can configure what columns you want to give access to in the portal selection process. Similarly, for filters also, you have the same options. So by default, all the filters are shown. But if you want to restrict it, you can use the same columns as well for the filters. Okay, so at the end of it, when you select all this information on the SSP data source, you are done and say click the done button. You have defined now SSP data source. The next thing is to use it in the self-service portlet. So for that, go to personalized dashboard page, create your own page or edit any existing page. I've created my own page here. Then search for the portlet. So using the so you can see this out of box portlet. It's called self-service portlet and it's available for everybody. There is no special security around this portlet. You can just select that and say add. So now once you go to that portlet, you'll see this self-service portlet. Just click on the edit, and here where you are going to see the self-service portlet configuration thing. So the first thing, the first pane is the data source pane. So when you click here, it will give you a list of SSP data sources in your system that you just defined. So I selected my SSP as my data source that I just defined. Now you can see all the columns that I showed you earlier on the slide. You can see it here, and notice that for a couple of columns where I renamed the column, it shows with the renamed label. That is issue summary and the issue count. So that's the first data source pane. You just select that. The next one is the visualization pane, where you see there are 12 different charts or graphs which are available for use for any end user. Basically, once you use a particular chart or graph, it gives you additional parameters in the visualization parameter. And for example, in this case, I have used clustered column chart. So for the parameters that you need to select is the axis, legend, and values. What I've done is, for the program name, I would like to see for each program, I would like to see the count of risk count, issue count, and the scope change count. So what I've done, in axis column, I have dragged the program name from the data source pane right here. And for the values, I have dragged the issue count, risk count, and scope change from the data pane right here. The third pane is the filters pane, where again, you can actually drag if you want to filter by any specific columns, for example, status or the program name, you drag the program name right here, put it in the filter. Same thing, you drag the status right here, and then select accordingly if you want to filter. I have not selected any filters, although I have selected the filters. I have not selected any values in this screenshot. And the last is the preview pane. So when you select data source pane, visualization parameters, and the filters, it shows you how your portlet is going to look. So it basically gives you the preview. So that's the that's how you can configure. It's very easy to configure. Just drag and drop for the visualization. Select any basically graphs, and it will the parameters will change accordingly. And then you will see in the preview pane. So now I'm showing you another representation. So notice that I'm using the same SSP data source, but here I'm actually want to see or showcase the mapping of the program with the health. So that's why I have used the program name with the overall health. And for the size of the Sankey diagram, or the mapping, you can see this mapping, the size, I'm using the issue number. So for the Advantage Airline merger, this program has less number of issues as compared to the Black Diamond initiative. So the size of this mapping curve, it basically changes based on the number of issues. So the point I'm trying to make is, in the earlier I have shown using the stacked column chart, I used my same SSP data source, but represented program and the issue, scope change, and risk count. Where here I use the same data source, but I'm actually showing the mapping or a relationship with the program and the health. So that's the power of this self-service portlet. So for any business user, he wants to present that to presentation or anything reporting, he can use the same SSP but showcase different side of the data, and that's the power of this feature. Now let's look at some of the additional features that were introduced in version 10, and one of the important one is the manage views. So as I said, that you can have any number of views using the same data source portlet. You can actually create these manage views, so it will be easier for you to select the one that you want to present or see. So click on the manage view button, and then you can actually change the, so here I have used the donut chart and the default diagram. I have selected the parameters for it in the visualization pane. If I want to create another chart based on the same SSP but use suppose list view, I can do that. Just select, and you can use this button to copy the donut one, then change it to the list view. I'm going to select the graph list view and use the parameters for it. You can edit the name using clicking this pencil icon, and you can have any numbers of views to represent different or show a different dimension of the data. Okay, and that all these are stored under these manage views. If you do not want any specific one, just use the cross button to delete that view. So this is basically, this is how it shows on the portlet. And now when you click on this icon, you will see the different manage views. Select one when you want to change the view to that particular view, and you can do that while presentation or anything when you are checking the data. But with the same portlet, you can see the different dimension basically easily. In addition to switch to view, the product also added the drill to view feature here. So in the visualization pane, when you select these different graphs, there is a drill to view option also available. So you can actually set it up for these charts. So when, for example, for in this donut chart, when a user looks at it at the portlet and when he clicks it, the list view by status will be shown for this particular portlet. So that's the drill view for this SSP portlet. Now let me talk about the gauge diagram. So as I mentioned, the Sankey diagram and the gauge diagram, they were actually introduced in version 10.0. I had already showed you the Sankey diagram and how you can show the mapping between the two entities. And now with the gauge diagram, which most of us are familiar as in the car dashboard, which shows normal the speed. So in the gauge diagram, these are the parameters that you need to set up. So here, if you see the value which is shown in the middle, which is picked up from the base actual cost, it's shown here as 400. And for the gauge diagram, to show actual the scale, you have to use two values, the minimum value and maximum value. So here in this case, it's shown as 0 to 900. And the target value is coming from the base forecast cost. So which is shown using this flag. And so it's easier for you to compare the progress of these metrics based on the target. Also at the bottom, you can see the color scales. So you can actually set the range and the threshold for each color so that it can be represented on the gauge chart. So the target value is always shown as a flag here. Okay, now let's talk about the the way where you can actually send the data in the self-service portlet to Excel and Power BI using the OData links. So the main question is, why can't we use the OData directly to export the data to Excel and Power BI? The first thing is, most of the customers are currently using SSO as their authentication. So that would be a problem when you are sharing data directly with OData, because that's not, we need to make sure that it needs to be authenticated. So even if the customer's instance is not authenticated with SSO, but even the PPM, if it is using the PPM credentials, those credentials need to be shared to see the data from the OData directly. And also, when you are sharing the data outside the PPM, admins always want to have visibility and control over that what data is shared. And if admins decide to stop any sharing of some data, they should have in control to do that. And all these concerns and the issues are addressed using the OData link. So let's talk about that to see what OData links does. So to use the OData links in the SSP portlet, the first thing you need to set or select is this server.configuration using the admin console. Turn it on. Currently it shows beta, but you can use it. And in this SSP portlet, when you are setting up the SSP data source, there is a fourth tab called as OData link. So you need to make sure that you enable this link here, right here, and provide the users or security groups or organization, you select them to make sure who can actually share this OData link. Okay, you can configure the security right here. Here is so once the OData link is enabled on the data source, SSP data source, you will see this on the data source pane. When you select in the portlet, click on that. It will show you this to create a OData link name, add the description, make sure it's enabled, and then it creates this record for you when you are creating. Okay, in the link, you say, if you click on this show link, it shows this entire link, and you can actually click on this icon to copy it on your clipboard, so you'll be able to share in the Excel or the Power BI. But before going to that, I just wanted to showcase some of the audit information available in the OData link. It shows the access count. So once this link is shared for the users, it actually shows how many times this link has been accessed. Okay, so you can see this access count. Also, there is audit in like creation date and last access on this date information for audit purpose as well. So this is very useful information. This is available for all the users who are creating their own OData link, as well as this information will be available for the admins as well. So once you have copied that OData link, go to Excel. I'm going to show that how you integrate with the Excel here. So open Excel spreadsheet, go to the data tab. In the data tab, select from other sources and select from OData feed. Once you select that, copy your link, and it will give you a couple of more options to configure the data coming from PPM. Again, this is a live data coming from PPM, and it will show all the information, all the columns available coming from the SSP. But here in the Excel, it will give you option to either rename the columns. If you do not want to showcase some of the columns, you can delete them. For example, like ID columns or hyperlink columns. You can rename them. You can change the sequence of the columns. So after doing all these things, it will basically display it in this format in the Excel. Again, this is a live data coming directly from PPM. It does not need any authentications once the link is once the link is copied to the Excel. So every time if there is a data change in PPM, for example, the program display status for one of these program gets changed, when the user looking at the Excel, if refreshes the data, is going to see the new modified status. So it's actually a live data coming from program. So it's having a window to a PPM data. Okay. So, and this will continue, they will continue to see this Excel until the leak is active. So now that we have managed to export the data, the one another thing is to how to make sure that this is safe. And so anybody who has created the links, he has access. He can see the audit information that I just displayed, and then the users can who have shared this OData link can revoke these data links, as well as admins can see all the OData links shared for various portlets, and admins can also disable all the data links or selective ones if they want to do that for any other reasons. When the data is retrieved from the OData link, there is one more additional things that the product always creates entry in the PPM logon stations with the authentication OData type. So this is audit information going in the PPM logon stations. And with that, I'm done with my presentation.